Something in your life is quietly unraveling, but it's not chaos. It's mercy in disguise. What feels like loss is actually protection. Allah is gently clearing the path for who you're becoming. He's removing what can't go with you to the next chapter, because what's coming requires a version of you that's freer, stronger, and more aligned. You're here right now because your soul finally got still enough to hear Him. This isn't random. This is the beginning, the quiet opening of an unseen door. Sign 1. The ache in your soul is not emptiness. It's a sacred invitation. You call it pain, that heaviness in your chest, the sudden wave of emotion in a quiet moment, that ache you feel even when nothing seems wrong. You smile around people, but something inside feels burdened, like you're holding more than you were ever meant to carry. You try to escape it, scrolling it away, working through it, praying from fear instead of surrender. But the truth? What you're feeling is not failure. It's not weakness. It's a call. Software subtle, divine. Allah is not shouting. He's not punishing. He's gently awakening your soul. That ache is not breaking you. It's breaking you open. You've been living in a version of yourself that was designed for survival. People-pleasing, avoiding abandonment, staying small. But you weren't created just to survive. You were made to evolve, to rise, to grow beyond the limits the world has put on you. And when the old version of you can't hold what the future needs, Allah begins to release it. Not through noise, but through stillness. Not through destruction, but through divine discomfort. What feels like sadness is a sign. What feels like silence is space. What feels like pain is purification. Allah never wastes a tear. Never wastes a moment when you collapse in your room whispering, "I don't know what's happening to me." He knows. He knows your outer world may look fine, but your inner world has been whispering for relief. He knows you've been carrying too much. You were never meant to hold the weight of everything, only the weight of a soul anchored to Him. So when you ignore your soul's voice, He allows the ache to grow, not to harm you, but to redirect you. Sometimes pain is the only voice we finally listen to. Sometimes it's the only thing loud enough to bring us back to Him. So next time that ache comes, don't run, don't numb, don't cover it, sit with it. Ask not, "Why do I feel like this?" But what is Allah trying to show me? Because that ache, it's a map, a return, a moment where your soul finally says, "Ya Allah, I need you." And that's when the real door opens. Not outside of you, but within. The door to peace, to healing, to truth. You didn't come this far to fall apart. You came this far because you were finally ready to feel. Ready to be led. Ready to rise. This isn't your ending, it's your becoming. The you Allah has always known, slowly waking up. So when the ache visits again, say, "Ya Allah, I hear you. Even if I don't fully understand, I trust you're bringing me back to life." Sign 2, every door that closed whispered, "Not this, I'm protecting you." You begged for it to stay. You prayed with shaking hands for it to work. You gave it your effort, your hope, your heart. And yet, it slipped away. The door shut, the connection faded, the opportunity vanished, and in the silence that followed, you felt not just rejected, but forgotten. Ya Allah, why didn't you let it work? What did I do wrong? Maybe nothing. Maybe it wasn't supposed to work. Maybe the loss was actually love. Sometimes what we beg for is a test. What we think will save us might actually harm us. And what looks like our future might only delay our real purpose. Allah sees what we cannot. He sees the poison behind the smile, the heartbreak behind the dream, the danger hidden in what looks perfect. So in His mercy, He removes it. Yes, it hurts, deeply, but He removes it not to punish, but to protect, not to reject, but to redirect. Because His goal isn't to build a life that merely looks good, it's to build a soul that is truly safe. Safe from deception, safe from destruction, safe with Him. So when the door closes, remember, it didn't lock you out. It led you inward, to trust more, to surrender deeper, to say with a trembling heart, "Ya Allah, I don't understand, but I trust you still." He broke your heart not out of anger, but out of mercy. That door you keep glancing back at, the one you still quietly hope might open again, it didn't close because Allah was displeased with you. It closed because He loves you more than you can comprehend. Real faith begins not when we receive, but when we lose and still choose to trust. You thought it was a loss, but it was a shield. And one day you'll stop mourning that closed door and start whispering, "Thank you for not letting me walk into that fire I mistook for light." Think about it. How many nights did you cry over something, only to realize later that its absence saved you? How often did you feel abandoned, when in truth Allah was protecting you from a silent harm your heart couldn't yet name? That person who left? They weren't meant to know the version of you that's now unfolding. That opportunity you lost? It would have stolen you from your purpose. The plan you clung to? It was small, and Allah never writes small stories for souls He created with depth. So yes, He closed the door, but not every door. Just the one you were forcing yourself through. Just the one too narrow for the size of your becoming. And in time, you'll look back and say, "Ya Allah, thank you for not giving me what I thought I needed, for giving me better, not louder, not shinier, but better, because it came with peace. The kind of peace that doesn't ask you to shrink, the kind that doesn't confuse you, the kind that doesn't make you question your worth." So if something walked away, if a door shut, if a dream died, don't chase it. Don't try to force open what Allah lovingly closed. Instead say Alhamdulillah with your trust, not just your tongue, even if it hurt, because that closed door was the beginning of your protection. Sign 3. Your isolation isn't abandonment, it's alignment. The call stopped. The invitations dried up. The ones who once laughed with you now scroll past your life as if you were never there. Some disappeared so quietly you didn't even notice, until the silence grew loud. And in that silence, a voice crept in. "You're not lovable. You're too much. You're not worth staying for." But that voice was never from Allah. You mistook your isolation for rejection. But what if it wasn't punishment? What if it was a sacred realignment? There's a kind of solitude that doesn't destroy, it purifies. It disconnects you from the noise so you can finally reconnect to what's real. That's what this season is. You're not being left behind. You're being pulled inward. Back to your soul. Back to your purpose. Back to Allah. The crowd was drowning out His whisper. Their approval was louder than your own prayer. So in His mercy, Allah removed the crowd, not to harm, but to heal. Because what's coming can't be built in noise. You can't hear divine guidance when you're consumed by human opinions. You can't walk your destined path while still holding hands with those who were never meant to go the distance. So He separates you, not forever, but for long enough. Long enough for you to finally sit with yourself. Long enough to realize that only He can do what you've been asking people to do. Yes, it hurts, but look deeper. What has grown in you during this silence? What prayers have risen from your lips that never would have if life stayed easy? This isn't abandonment. This is divine alignment. A return to the version of you that prays with truth, that breaks and rebuilds with faith, that stops needing the world's attention, because you finally feel Allah's. You were chosen for depth, for refinement, not applause. And the people He removed, they don't outweigh the peace He replaced them with. So next time the silence feels suffocating, ask not, "Why am I alone?" Ask, "Ya Allah, what are you showing me through this?" And slowly the silence will stop scaring you, because you'll realize Allah only isolates the heart when He's about to fill it with something sacred. Sign 4. When the familiar falls apart, heaven is near. Everything seems stable, not perfect, but predictable. You had your safe spaces, your go-to people, your carefully held plans. They made life feel manageable, but then suddenly, it all shifted. The comfort cracked. The familiar began to fall away. And though it feels like loss, it might just be the arrival of something holier, something new, something true. Life made sense. Not perfect, but it gave you something to hold when the world got loud. There was structure, comfort, people who felt constant. And then, without warning, it all began to unravel. The ones you trusted became distant. The places that once brought peace turned strangely hollow. The routines, the anchors, the soothing distractions suddenly stopped working, and you're left standing in the rubble, whispering through tears, "Why now? Why me? What did I do wrong?" But what if you did nothing wrong? What if this wasn't punishment, but a sacred message? That your soul is outgrowing the life you built in survival mode? What if the familiar isn't feeding you anymore, just keeping you small? What if everything collapsing isn't the end, but a shift, because heaven is near and Allah is making room for it? You asked for peace, you prayed for healing, you begged for a deeper connection, but you didn't realize those prayers would cost you. They would cost you fake friendships, the illusion of safety, unhealed habits, the life that looked good but never truly held you. Because Allah is not just the giver, He is the breaker of illusions. And sometimes the only way He can build the version of you He wrote into your story is to let the life you settled for fall. Because if He didn't shake it, you wouldn't move. If He didn't remove them, you would have kept begging for love you were never meant to chase. If He didn't collapse your plans, you would have stayed somewhere quietly breaking. So this fall, it's sacred, it's heavy, but it's holy. It's not a breakdown, it's a beginning. It's Allah stripping away everything you thought you needed so He can give you what actually fills you. And yes, it feels cruel. It feels lonely. It feels like He's taking and taking and taking. But look again, hasn't the collapse made you more real? Hasn't it deepened your prayers, humbled your heart, brought you to Him, not out of routine, but out of raw desperation? That's not destruction. That's divine construction. You're not being buried, you're being planted. And seeds don't bloom in comfort. They grow in darkness, under pressure, in silence. So if everything around you is falling apart, it means something within you is coming alive. Because Allah never breaks without purpose. He lets things fall so you'll finally reach for what's eternal. He's pulling you out of a life that made sense on paper but starved your soul. The chaos you feel, it's not the end of your story. It's the end of your limits. Let it fall. Let it all fall. Because what's collapsing isn't your life. It's the shell around your destiny. And when the dust settles, you will rise. Not with the same routines, but with revelation. Not with old comfort, but with clarity. With a heart that finally knows what it means to belong fully to Allah. So don't fear the falling. It means the sky is closer than you think. Heaven is near. Sign 5. If your heart feels too heavy to carry, it means you're being rewritten. Your heart feels heavy, not in a way others can see, but in that silent, invisible way that presses on your chest and sits in your soul. You smile like it's armor. You laugh so they don't ask questions. You whisper, Alhamdulillah, while quietly wondering if you're allowed to feel this tired. Some mornings you wake up already exhausted. Some nights you fall asleep praying tomorrow will feel different. But here's the truth. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're not failing. You're being rewritten. Allah is doing something sacred inside of you. Something deep. Something unseen. And just like anything being rebuilt, it's painful before it's beautiful. You prayed for healing. You asked for peace. You begged for change. But real healing doesn't arrive wrapped in comfort. It arrives wrapped in surrender, in heartbreak, in confusion. Because Allah doesn't just rearrange your life, He transforms your heart. And transformation isn't soft music and golden sunsets. It's crying into your prayer rug at 2 a.m. It's wondering if you're losing your mind. When in reality, you're shedding every old belief that no longer fits who you're becoming. You're not just tired, you're molting. You're shedding skin shaped by fear, rejection, trauma. You're being stripped of the self you had to be to survive, so you can become the self you were meant to be to thrive. Yes, it hurts, but it's holy, because Allah is replacing your pain-hardened edges with something softer, truer, stronger, more surrendered. That heaviness in your chest, it's your soul expanding. It's your heart making space. Not just for belief, but for faith. The kind of faith that says, Ya Allah, I'm not okay, but I trust you anyway. So if you feel like you're carrying too much, if the days blur into the nights, if you feel like your soul is holding back a storm, know this, you're not falling apart. You're being rewritten by the one who knows every broken piece of you and exactly where it belongs. Every silent tear was ink. Every heartbreak, a new sentence. Every unanswered prayer, a better story being written. You're not done. You're not being erased. You're just in the middle of becoming someone heaven recognizes, someone this dunya could never destroy. So don't curse the heaviness. Don't rush to escape it. Don't numb it with distractions. Sit with it. Feel it. Let it hurt. Because one day, not far from now, you'll look back at this chapter and whisper, This is where Allah rewrote me. And what He writes is always worth the wait. Sign 6. The people you thought you needed became silent so you could finally hear Allah. They were everything to you. The one you ran to with your truth. The name that stayed in your du'as. The friend who made you feel safe. The person you were sure would walk with you to the end. But then silence came. Quietly, like a sunset that never asked your permission to leave. One day their replies grew shorter. The calls stopped. The warmth faded. And you began noticing. You were always the one reaching out. Even then, they no longer reached back. You stared at your phone more than you'd ever admit. You watched them move on while your world stood still. And deep inside, something broke. It wasn't just sadness. It was invisibility. You didn't just feel rejected. You felt erased. And the ache whispered, What did I do wrong? Why would Allah take away the only people who made me feel seen? But what if the silence wasn't abandonment? What if it was divine? What if the people who faded weren't your source of peace, but a borrowed comfort Allah used until it was time for you to come closer to Him? Because He knows when your heart clings too tightly to voices other than His. He knows when you're leaning more on creation than on the Creator. And so, out of mercy, not malice, He lets the world go quiet. He allows their silence to become loud so His presence can become louder. You thought you needed them, but what you really needed was what they made you feel. Safety, love, belonging. And those were never meant to be found in people. They were always meant to be found in sujood, in whispered du'as, in the sacred kind of loneliness that leads to closeness with Allah. That's why they left. Not because you were too much, not because you weren't enough, but because Allah loved you too much to let you build your heart on something that wouldn't last. Sometimes He removes what you think you need just to show you that what you truly needed was already waiting for you. In Him. He doesn't only test you with pain, He tests you with silence. Because silence is where clarity lives. You'll never hear your soul when the noise of the world is all around you. You'll never feel divine guidance while you're addicted to human validation. So He distances them. He closes the doors you kept knocking on. He lets the echoes fade so you finally look up and say, Ya Allah, I thought I needed them, but maybe I just needed you all along. And when you finally stop begging for echoes, you begin to hear something deeper. His nearness, His mercy, His love. You begin to pray differently, not just to be heard, but to be held. You realize it wasn't the loss of people that broke you, it was how much you leaned on them instead of Him. And in that quiet, painful clarity, you stop asking, why did they leave me? And start asking, what was Allah trying to show me by letting them go? Because He doesn't take without giving. He doesn't remove without replacing. And He never allows silence without planting something sacred if you choose to listen. So tonight, if you feel forgotten, if your circle has grown small, if your phone screen is empty, remember this. Allah removed their voices so you could finally hear His. Sign 7. You're being pulled away from the world because the world can't hold what Allah is about to place inside you. Lately, everything feels distant. You sit in a room full of people, but your heart feels like it's somewhere else. You try to laugh at the same jokes, go to the same places, have the same conversations, but something inside you feels off. It's like your soul is outgrowing the life you once fit perfectly into. The people you used to connect with now feel foreign. The distractions that once entertained you now feel empty. The ambitions that once drove you now feel shallow. The world, it feels too small. And maybe you're scared to admit it, because if you do, you'll have to face the truth. Allah is pulling you away, not because you're being punished, not because you're failing, but because what's being planted inside of you is too sacred to stay buried in shallow soil. You're not being rejected. You're being extracted, piece by piece, layer by layer. You're being prepared for something higher. And the world, with all its noise, distractions, and illusions, can't hold what Allah is placing in your heart. There is a depth forming in you now, a strength wrapped in softness, a light that no longer shines outward for attention, but inward for truth. And this kind of becoming requires separation. You can't awaken while still dancing with your distractions. You can't carry divine clarity in a heart addicted to validation. You can't walk into your next purpose while clinging to the comfort of who you used to be. So he pulls you away from circles, from conversations, from the spaces where you once felt seen. Because being seen isn't the same as being safe. And slowly you start to feel like you don't belong anywhere, like no one truly understands you. And that ache, it gets louder. But let me tell you something honest and divine. You're not meant to fit in right now. You're meant to form. You are being preserved, like something fragile yet powerful, like something that must be hidden in the dark until it's strong enough to shine without breaking. You are not behind, you are being protected. Because what Allah is building inside of you, peace, resilience, vision, taqwa, these are not qualities that grow in crowds. They grow in wilderness. They bloom in quiet nights. They deepen in long sujoods, where your tears speak louder than your voice, and you'll feel it more and more. You'll be in a room full of people, but your heart will feel far away. You'll try to explain what's shifting inside of you, but no one will understand. You'll even try to shrink, just to belong again, but it will suffocate you. That's not something wrong with you. That's Allah saying, you don't belong there anymore. I'm preparing you for something greater, and you must trust that, even when it's lonely, even when it feels like your entire life is disappearing behind you, even when the world becomes quiet and the only sound left is the beating of your heart echoing back to the one who created it. You are not lost. You are being refined. You are not broken. You are being preserved. And soon, when the world sees you again, they won't recognize you, because you won't return as the person who left. You'll return as the person Allah was forming in silence. So don't rush to belong again. Don't panic because the old world doesn't recognize you. You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to rise. And when you finally do, you'll understand why Allah had to pull you away. Because what He placed inside of you was never meant to be kept small. It was meant to change everything. Sign 8. The moment you stop begging for what left is the moment Allah unveils what was meant. You kept praying they'd come back. You begged Allah to fix it, to soften their heart, to give you one more chance. You replayed the memories. You rewrote the conversations in your mind. You told yourself, if I had just done this differently, if I had just said that instead, if I had just been more or less or something else entirely. You made their absence a reflection of your worth, and you started calling heartbreak a form of failure, but it wasn't. They didn't leave because you were unlovable. They left because Allah needed your hands empty. You see, the ache in your soul isn't because they're gone. It's because you're still holding on, still gripping the past, still asking Allah to return what He gently removed, out of mercy. And you wonder why nothing moves, why your heart feels heavy, why your prayers feel unanswered, why your chest feels full of tears that won't fall. It's because you're still asking for something that Allah already said no to. Not out of anger, not to punish you, but because the space you're trying to fill was meant for something far greater than what you lost. There's a door waiting to open, but it can't, not until you unclench your fists. Because Allah doesn't pour into full hands. He doesn't place the extraordinary into a heart still obsessed with what was ordinary. He doesn't reveal what was meant until you surrender what was only temporary. And that moment, the one where you fall into sujood, not to beg for their return, but to say, Ya Allah, I trust you, even if I don't understand. That's when it happens. That's when things begin to move. That's when the light enters in ways it never could before. That's when Allah replaces the ache with peace. Real peace. Not the numb kind, not the distracted kind, but the kind that makes you breathe again. the kind that turns your chest into a sanctuary, the kind that doesn't depend on who stays or who goes, but on who never left. You thought healing would come when they return, but Allah knew it would come only when you released them, because if they were written into your journey, they would have stayed. No test would have shaken them. No silence would have scared them. No distance would have removed them. And if they return someday, they won't come back as a comfort for your loneliness. They'll return as a reward for your surrender. But if they don't, then trust this. Allah did not allow them to leave without already preparing someone or something far more aligned with your soul's next chapter. And that chapter, it can't begin until you stop rewriting the old one. So breathe. Let go, not because they don't matter, but because Allah matters more. Your heart was never meant to be chained to something that had an expiration date. It was meant to rise, to expand, to be filled by what Allah handpicked for you, without confusion, without begging, without breaking. And that unveiling, that divine replacement, that secret your soul was created for, it will only appear when you finally whisper, Ya Allah, I let it go. Now show me what was meant. And He will, because He always does. If you've seen even one of these signs in your life lately, then this isn't just a passage. It's not just a reflection, it's your awakening. Allah doesn't move randomly. He moves perfectly, with precision, with mercy, and with timing so divine it only makes sense in hindsight. So tonight, stop asking when, stop asking why. Instead, sit with the silence. Let it heal what noise kept wounding. Let your soul breathe again and whisper back to the one who's been guiding you all along. I don't see the door yet, Ya Allah, but I know now you're opening it, and I'll walk through when you say it's time. What's meant for you doesn't rush. It arrives when your heart finally makes room.